Welcome to South Africa Tonight. The Presidency has received the second part of the state capture inquiry report, but many are skeptical that perpetrators will not be brought to book. The Defend Our Democracy campaign says if the NPA doesn't have the capacity, private prosecutions should happen instead. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Reverend Frank Chikane, a convener at the campaign, joining us now live from Johannesburg. Reverend, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Of course, we do know that part 2 of the state capture inquiry report has been handed over to the Presidency. It focuses on Denel and Transnet. I know that you obviously testified at the state capture inquiry and you were part of the first report regarding Themba Maseko telling you about him being told by the former President Jacob Zuma to go and meet the Guptas, and then, of course, being told other things which he was not comfortable with. So part 2 has now been released, and the question remains, which is something you're bringing up as a concern, the consequences for those involved. As things stand, do you think there will be proper prosecutions?
Well, they should. I think we should not let off on that point. The National Prosecution Authority should do its job and prosecute those who have committed crimes, especially where there is sufficient evidence to do so. And what we are saying is that in the case where they don't have the capacity, the law has limitations because it says you can only do private prosecutions if the NPA gives a certificate that says they are not going to prosecute or have chosen not to prosecute. But what we are saying as the Defend Our Democracy campaign is that the law, it's important for people who have committed crimes to be prosecuted, because otherwise the majority of the people lose confidence in the law and then feel the way in which leaders have been corrupt and stealing people's money is the way of life, and therefore you corrupt the whole society. So if the NPA doesn't have enough capacity, then it must allow for private prosecution. But would like the NPA to build the capacity. You've had lawyers, you've got investigators who are at the commission who can be contracted in. And if there are financial challenges, we have said that, some of us have said that a fund can be created to make sure that the prosecutions happen. And there were sensitivities about if business gives money, they will influence the process. We're saying no. You create an independent fund where people put money, and that money gets used to make sure people are prosecuted. If we fail to do so, then there will be less and less respect for the law and less confidence in the courts, and therefore more and more corruption.
Yeah. And just listening to that discussion and the suggestions at hand, apart from private prosecutions, which, as you say, the NPA has to first say that it can't go ahead before that happens. There's also from outer a suggestion that we look at civil groups, NGOs, being able to actually prosecute. Currently, the law doesn't allow for that. So what are the alternatives, especially when it comes to assisting the NPA to do its job, because it says it already has too much on its hands and it can't afford it?
No, what we are saying is they must create the capacity. They have been aware that the commission reports are coming. They have followed the evidence at the commission, and therefore they should have built the capacity. If they have not built it yet, then I'm saying that there's ready-made people who were investigators at the commission, who were lawyers at the commission, who should be drawn in as a continuity to continue what they were doing and enable the National Prosecution Authority to prosecute. What we are saying is if the National Prosecution Authority fails to do that, or says we don't have capacity, then private prosecution should happen. It's costly, I'm told, and entities like ESCOM, for instance, could proceed to lay charges and charge people. But you need the prosecution authority as well to participate. But some said we could do something else. Prepare the cases against people where there is enough evidence before us and hand them over to the National Prosecution Authority to say it's ready-made, here's the material, prosecute. But this country cannot afford to fail to deal with those who committed crimes, especially crimes of state capture, because that will mean that we continue living in a lawless society. This is what the campaign of Defend Our Democracy is about. We need a society where it's not lawless and that everybody will comply with the law.
Lastly, the Presidency today telling the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in Parliament, and it was Mondli Gungubele, the Minister in the Presidency, he's actually admitted that the Presidency has no plan of action for holding those implicated in COVID-19 corruption to account. And, you know, this is another aspect of how looting continues in our government. And when we come to consequences, there are very frank statements about accountability that are shocking. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I haven't heard that. I have not studied it, so I can't make a comment about it. The only thing I can say is that where there are people who have committed crimes, we must prosecute. We're prosecuting ordinary people who steal apples in a shop or some pair of shoes, but fail to prosecute people who have taken billions out of the state coffers or state entities. We cannot afford to fail in this regard. That's why the people of South Africa must stand up and take and say to government, you have to act accordingly. And if the state fails, then we're going to have to make sure that the state is forced to do what it's supposed to do, because that's critical. It's what they are appointed to do.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. That was Reverend Frank Chikane from the Defend Our Democracy campaign.